I want to quickly talk to you about startup metrics and KPIs because if you have a startup and you want to attract, let's say, business lenders or investors, you got to really pay attention to your metrics, right? Because those metrics actually tell a story about your startup, how you're running it, and your prospects, your economic prospects, your profitability prospects. Okay. So in today's conversation, I want to share with you a few metrics. They are really important whether you talk to any stakeholders or even regulators for that matter, okay, or even employees. I mean, if you want to attract the best of the best when it comes to your staff members, you got to really have your startup metrics actually understood and properly conveyable, okay. So the first metric I want you to think about is something called the activation rate or conversion rate. Let's talk about that. So if you think about activation rate, you're talking about monetization to the core, monetization at the core of your business. Okay. So an activation rate measures the percentage of users or sales prospects who complete a specific action. Let's say you have a startup, you have a product in the pipeline, and you're actually you're calculating the activation rate to sort of see the monetization prospects for that particular product or service for that matter. Okay. So that's really what activation rate is. So examples actually include, let's say, the percentage of email recipients who actually sign up for an online event. Let's say you have a Zoom call or you have a Zoom webinar or you have a Calendly sort of activity. So you're looking at the percentage of email recipients who sign up for an online event or the percentage of web page visitors who download an ebook or who actually sign up for some kind of, I would say, updates, for instance, okay? That's for activation rate. Now, conversion rate refers specifically to an activation rate that moves a prospect further down the sales funnel, like the number of events attendees who request a sales demo. And if you are a startup owner, you got to really care about the conversion rate because conversion rate, again, pushes you closer to the bottom line, to your revenue work stream. That's the first KPI. Second KPI, the ARR or MRR. So annual revenue, annual recurring revenue, or monthly recurring revenue. You're gonna hear this a lot. Even if you're like if you're in SaaS, okay. But even if you are like in the real economy, like healthcare or restaurant, you still have to think about ARR or MRR. So ARR is a key metric used to estimate expected revenue from new and existing subscription-based services or products over a 12-month period. It takes actually consistent revenue inflows and outflows into account. So startups actually use ARR to forecast their growth rate, and MRR calculates recurring monthly revenue. So you just divide the ARR by 12 to get the MRR. Next, you have the average selling price. Again, I'm just going through the startup metrics and KPIs for you to really have a clear notion of, right? So the ASP actually is the average contract price paid by customers for past sales over a specific time period, such as 1 year. Now, there are some industries where instead of 1 year, they do this on a monthly basis. Sometimes they do it on a quarterly basis. Sometimes they do it on a half a year basis. Okay, so or even sometimes you do it you do it every 2 years. It depends on what's really logical for your industry. So to calculate ASP, the cumulative contract value is divided by the total number of total deals closed. Okay, so if you know your ASP, you are actually ahead of the competition. Why? Because you understand clearly and directly your company's deal sizes and forecast future revenue. If you're able to forecast future revenue, you're able to write a complete business plan or even have a complete pitch deck for investors or business lenders. Another metric for you to pay attention to is the burn rate. You hear this a lot. Burn rate here, like investors are asking you, what's the burn rate, right? Now, gross burn is your company's total monthly expenses. And burn rate or cash burn rate is the rate your company burns money after accounting for the company's positive cash flow or revenue, right? So when you think about burn rate, you're talking about the cash outflows. So if you calculate your statement of cash flow, where you have cash inflows and cash outflows, your cash outflows determine your burn rate. So most companies calculate both the gross and net burn rate, gross burn minus revenue, both of which help determine the cash runway. So another metric, and this is what I just talked about. So the cash runway. Let's quickly go more granular on that because the cash runway is important for your startup. If you have a startup, you got to pay attention to your cash, your burn rate, but your cash runway because that's what actually gives you some kind of power. Okay, some operational power in this economy. No cash, no activity, right? So cash runway is the total amount of time you can finance your business operations before you run out of cash. So it can be 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. Okay. So your runway is a function of burn rate. It's the length of time you can sustain the same burn rate. So making changes to your burn rate by cutting, let's say, expenses or raising revenue will alter your runway. So the whole idea here is to think about, again, going back to what I said, you're thinking about cash outflows and cash inflows. So the bottom line is you have to think what works for your specific industry, your specific business. Okay. You have another KPI, another metric. That's the churn rate. You hear this a lot also. You have churn rate or customer retention rate. So if you have a startup, you pay attention a lot to the churn rate. Why? Because first of all, it's kind of complicated to get new customers. So once you have those new customers, you got to really make sure that you retain them, right? The retention rate becomes quite essential because if you are actually spending money, because there's something called the CAC, the CAC. So if your client acquisition cost is actually money, it's part of the burn rate. Like you're spending money to acquire clients and you're not able to retain them. That's kind of hard, right? So, but if you retain them, you are lowering your CAC, your CAC over time. Okay, and that's what you want. You want to be in a situation where you are lowering gradually and consistently your CAC, your cost, like your client acquisition cost. So, what is churn rate or customer retention rate? That's the rate your customers cancel their subscriptions or contracts for your product or service. And you can calculate it by dividing the canceling or churning customers by your total customers over the same period. And so related to churn, customer retention rate measures the percentage of customers retained over a specific time period. So you can think about the churn rate being conversely or inversely correlated to customer retention rate. So another metric I want to really think about if you have a startup is the lead to customer conversion rate. I mean, the phrase itself says it all, right? It tells you what it is. So this is actually the percentage of leads that convert into paying customers over a specific period of time. So the bottom line is you want to have a high number of lead to customer conversion rate. If you have a low lead to customer conversion rate, you got to ask yourself, are you having the right leads? In other words, you have qualified leads, okay? Because not all leads not all leads are qualified, right? Some customers may be interested in some prospects may be interested in the products or services that your startup has, but they may not be qualified, maybe because of their geography, their economics, their psychographics, whatever. So it's one of those things where your goal as a startup founder is to actually refine your lead to customer conversion rate, your lead to customer profile over time. Another metric that you need to know about is something I just spoke about a few minutes ago. That's your CAC. Now it's time for me to actually dig a little deeper. So your CAC is actually your client acquisition cost or sometimes customer acquisition cost. It's so important because to acquire customers, you're spending money either through ads, through promote other types of promotion, or through email funnels, whatever. You're spending money. So to acquire one customer, you got to ask yourself, what is your CAC? To acquire one customer, how much you have to spend on average? $1, $1,000, $10, $100. And if you have that number over time, you know exactly whether you are in control of your churn rate, but also in control of your burn rate. Okay, so that's important. So if you think about CAC, this is a number that tells you how much it costs to acquire a new customers. A new customer, nothing really complicated here. So you want to calculate CAC by dividing the total acquisition expenses. Like I said, such as paid marketing efforts, referral fees, or sales cost by the number of new customers. And you do this over, let's say, 1 month. You can do this over 1 year. You can do this over 1 quarter. Whatever frequency, whatever timeline works for your specific business, you want to use it. Another startup metric or KPI for you to focus on right now. See, the thing is, when you have a startup, you have a business to run anyway. You have clients to acquire anyway, but you still need to really look at the back office. You got to look at the what I call the like the underlying the what I call the bottom line, but the bottom line from an analytical point of view. Okay, this is really important. So you have also employee satisfaction. So this is it's not quantifiable employee satisfaction. It is qualifiable. It is a quality sort of metric. Okay, as opposed to the others that I've told you where they're quantifiable. Okay, so employee satisfaction actually is quite essential because your employees are your number one assets. Your number one assets. Okay, human capital is really important, especially for a startup, because you haven't actually demonstrated your economic prominence yet. You haven't really reinforced your presence in the marketplace yet. Nobody knows you, or very few know you. It's time for you now to establish your dominance, quote unquote, your dominance. Okay, so failing to properly invest in your employees can be the difference between a thriving company and a failed startup. So employee satisfaction surveys can measure several internal metrics, such as employee sentiment around productivity, compensation, and benefits. You also have engagement metrics. Okay, this is an important element to really think about. So if you think about SaaS companies, for example, and this is something that you see a lot when it comes to SaaS startups. So for those companies, engagement metrics track the number of monthly active users, so the MAUs, okay, or daily active users. It's to be DAWs, so MAWs or DAWs, and how engaged those are with your software. So the specific metrics you use to value engagement will vary based on your company's products, okay, and goals. It really depends on the niche you're into. Your niche will actually determine what kind of metrics you have to calculate. Another metric I want you to really think about here is to actually pay attention to, what I call, the gross margin. Everybody knows the gross margin, but it's important to understand that gross margin is not just an accounting metric. It goes way beyond, especially if you are a startup, because a startup is all about revenue. It's all about monetization, but also all about survivability. You gotta survive, right? So gross margin, also known as gross profit margin, is actually a measure of your business's profitability, and it really compares your total revenue to the cost of goods sold. Sometimes you hear the terms cost of goods sold or cost of sales. They mean the same thing. And so understanding your startup's gross margins can help inform your pricing strategy. Because if you see your gross margin actually being static or being like going down, that just means you have to increase the price so that you can really compensate for the increased the increased expenses. You also have the lifetime value, the LTV, or the CLV, also known as customer lifetime value. And this is an important element for startup founders all over the country, because if they care about survivability, they have to then care about customer lifetime value. So when I say LTV, lifetime value, this is the estimated lifetime profit from an existing customer. So successful companies have LTVs that are higher than their COGS. then that's what you want, right? You want actually to earn more from a customer than you actually spend acquiring him or her in the first place. So if you're able to do that, then you are able to I mean skyrocket real fast. So if you think about companies like Apple or Google or like just those big companies, okay, imagine how much they spend on acquiring a new customer and how much that customer is worth to them once they are able to like convert them. So if you think about startup metrics, you also got to think about the market size. This is something that a lot of startup founders don't care about, but it's really important. So when I talk about market size, I'm talking about let's say the TAM, the SAM, and the SUM. Okay, and you also have other variations depending on the industry you're in. So one thing I want to say here is that when you think about market size, this is actually the total revenue potential in a given market based on the estimated total number of customers and historical sales or spending trends in the area or industry. So the economy, the economy plays a big role when it comes to the market trends because if people are not having money, they're not going to spend that much on things that they may be spending on now. So it's all about making sure that you pay attention to the economics in your area. So when you think about market size, this is an important metric to assess whether there is a big enough potential upside to warrant venture capital investment because VC firms really care about the the viability of the businesses they actually invest in, right? Because if they're thinking about getting if they're thinking about 10x in or 20x in their investments, they need to think about the long term and they need to think about industries that are not very competitive, industries that are still open, industries that are actually pretty open to everything, even foreign investments. So that's something you want to really think about. And one thing I want you to also think about here is that when you have actually a large enough market size, then you can really do a lot. Okay, because if you have a large market, even if you have 1% of the market, you're still good. If you have 5%, you're still good. If you have 10%, you're still good. But imagine the other way around. You have a small market, but you have 5% or 10% or 15% or even 100% of a small market. You may be worse off than the first example that I just gave you. So it's all relative to geography, to economics, of course, but also it depends on your specific vision, also the kind of strategy you want to really put forward. So, in conclusion to this conversation, I talked to you about the startup metrics and KPIs you need to pay attention to. Thank you so much. God bless you. I will see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.